Greetings, hello, and welcome to Equal First, the podcast about balancing self and service in life and love through career, connections, and courage. I'm Rob Farker, your humble host who helps that by seeking out the connections and wisdom that I need in order to put folks equal first with myself, I can help you, my listeners, figure out how to step into life more fully. Now, one of the fun things about doing my own podcast is the opportunity to get my own friends on the show, especially when they get up to some intriguing stuff. I met Xavier Esteban in the mid-teens when we were working for the same company in Cairns, and I just thought I should specify when I say mid-teens, I don't mean my age, I mean, 2010 to 2020, that middle 2015-ish kind of era. So yeah, now that is clear and understood. A year or two later, Xavier had moved back to Sydney to be closer to family. It took me around 6 years to follow him south, and we've been catching up since. One day early this year, which is 2024 for those listening in the future, I noticed him pop up on my Instagram feed with a reel about personal development and overcoming challenges. And when I had the idea for this podcast, I knew I would have to invite Xavier on. He describes himself as a family-first man, focused on personal and professional development. His aim is to be curious and foster a mindset of continuous learning, and he wants to leave a legacy that his family and friends can be proud of. Xavier's metric of success in life is whether he inspires people to start their own personal development journey. If our chats since I got back to Sydney are any indication, I'm sure he's already succeeded in spades, and I'm curious to find out where he's heading next. Xavier, thank you very much for your time, mate, and welcome to the show.
Thank you, Rob. Appreciate it.
Well, as I said in the lead up this evening, I've done a little bit of rejigging of the questions that I have for the show, themed them around the science fiction show Babylon 5, which had this wonderful through line of these three questions. So we'll start off with the first one. Who are you? Tell me a little bit about the person you enjoy seeing in the mirror. How would you describe yourself as you are?
Oh, myself right now. Well, I am middle-aged, I guess, which is still a shock to me. 43. Thinking that I am 43, where in my mind, my old man is still around that age. And so it's crept up relatively quickly, which is shocking, but also enjoyable at the same time. I think for me, it's... I'm a person that loves life, and it's taken me a while to get to where I am. I went through all the different challenges, heartaches, uncertain about who I am, what my purpose is throughout my whole life. Going through to my mid-20s to 30s, I was very social, but at the same time, there was that feeling that something was missing. And I was seeking and searching for those things in different ways, as I've mentioned to you in the past. And so for me, who I am right now is a person that loves his family, loves the challenges that day-to-day brings, trying to figure out what I can do in the here and now that's going to make sure that the second half of my life, hopefully longer, is something that I look back on and think, well, damn it, I gave it my best shot. I've achieved a lot. I've made a difference in this world to, even if it's just a handful of people. And I've left a legacy for my kids that they'll look back on and think, yeah, Dad was pretty good. Dad was pretty good. So that's where I'm at the moment.
Yeah. I mean, not having any kids myself, but I imagine, when you're raising these youngsters, aside from just making sure that they're as sane and capable as they are, I guess, that's a hope that they can look back on you as their dad and go, yeah, I'm pretty proud to have him as my pop.
Yeah,
although no,
for
pop's
sure.
granddad. Anyway, yeah. Now, I do know from our conversation since I got back down that life got kind of, shall we say, interesting for you back in the mid-teens, such that you kind of, that you wound up moving back to Sydney, which in and of itself didn't entirely solve your problems. And the thing that I'm really interested in chatting with guests for this show about are those times when they found themselves in a pit in life and perhaps even looked down at their hands as much as them being in that pit in the main wasn't their making, they looked down and noticed that there was actually a shovel in their hand and they'd been digging it themselves a little bit. Would it be fair to say that that time was that kind of tough time for you? I mean, you talked a little bit about how you were exploring things and, trying to work out what you wanted. Was that, the bottom of that period?
Look, I think the bottom period of my life would have been that kind of late 20s to early 30s for me, going through my what I call the quarter life crisis and not knowing who I am and and having that sense of loneliness, I guess, like seeking relationships, seeking the right one, trial and error, that type of stuff. So I think that's probably been where it's been the most difficult. But my experience in Cairns was different because it was a mixture of different feelings, right? So went up there in 2015 because my wife Linda, my partner Linda, is based up there. Family's there. Mum was sick, and so we've been doing this flying back and forth and long distance thing for a good old 6 or 7 years. I knew that we needed to take that next step in our journey and just be together in a more permanent way. And so coming down here in Sydney was difficult because there was the 2 young kids at that time. And so I made the decision to uproot and move my life and move up to Cairns. And at that time, I was mentally in a great place. Work was going well. I was working as a business analyst, been doing that for many years. Thought, okay, well, hell, like been doing the city grind for 15 odd years. Got to go move up to Cairns and just enjoy and see what life is all about up there in the slightly slower pace life, right? And then, like you mentioned, the challenges that faced is that, I've always been a career-driven person, always looking at trying to improve my career and better myself, and going up there in a place where work was very challenging and didn't really have too much in terms of business analysts and my type of experience. I felt like career-wise had to take, probably more than a few steps back and start again to work that I was doing when I was 19 or 20, right? And so that was a shock to me to do that, but I knew I had the experience. I knew I can do most of that work with my eyes closed. But financially, it took a toll, right? And as I discussed, is with a young family, having that, that uncertainty about how are we going to survive that week and how are we going to feed the family, that type of stuff. That as a man, as a provider, that really hit home and that really became difficult. Now, I was lucky that I had supportive parents and family that I could lean on at that time, but yeah, it was mentally challenging for me at that period.
Yeah. Although I am curious now, I mean, admittedly, my idea of what we were going to talk about was a little bit based around our well, not exactly our joint experiences, but me kind of sharing that time with you in the workplace, and then you moved back to Sydney. But I'm actually more curious now to dig a bit more into that quarter life crisis. What was going on with Xavier Esteban at that time? And, what makes you look back at that and go, that was the pit in my life?
Yeah, early, you finish high school, for me anyway, I wasn't 100% sure what I wanted to do. Ended up just going to do business courses because it was very generic at the time. And it's like, well, if I don't know exactly where I want to go, I'll just stick to business. So that's broad and that covers a lot of different things, which, a lot of people kind of tend to do when they don't know what to do. And I did that, fell into work. So for me, I always felt like I wanted to, growing up here in Western Sydney, I wanted to be a tradie, do that type of work, get your hands dirty, that type of stuff, right? And a lot of my friends fell into that piece of work. And my dad at the time, who's educated, uni, went really well, didn't ever put pressure on me in terms of what I need to do in terms of uni and study, but said, look, if you're going to do trade, think about not now, but in 10 years' time, how your body's going to fail you by doing that kind of laborish work. And so you might think it's great money right now, but that's going to be the challenge as you get older. I I fell into working in finance and customer service and that type of work, which worked well for me. It felt second nature. I was very customer focused or very people focused. And I thought I was very driven in terms of my career. Got into like team coordinator and kind of leadership in like 2 years and really enjoyed that piece of work. Yeah. And because all I wanted to do was learn, and make more money. Then as I got to my mid-20s, my life revolved around my friends, socializing, partying, working, that cycle. When I got to my mid-20s, I thought, I'm old. 20, 25, 26, I'm old. And the partying and socializing was still there and building that rapport. But what was my purpose, I guess now, and I look back at it, what's my purpose in life? And at that age, I was just lost. I had no idea, how do I find purpose? What is that? Like, how do I find meaning? I want to help people, but I can't make a career out of it. I'm stuck doing this finance work and, this isn't who I am. This is never what I thought I was going to be growing up. And for me, it felt like looking back at it, it was the early parts of kind of depression. I've never been, diagnosed or clinically diagnosed as being depressed, but I look back at those times thinking, well, I was masking myself in drinking and partying and just trying to find a reason or a purpose. And, it ended up leading me into what now I look back as personal development. Like I tried Spanish. I thought maybe if I learn Spanish, I can go overseas and, do that. And back then you didn't have apps, right? You only had CDs and books to go by and
I've still got my late wife's Michelle Thomas CDs for learning Spanish on the shelf, and I mean, between those and Duolingo, I hate to ought to myself, but there is a bit of me going, I've got a resource. I can be learning another damn language here. Why am I just sticking with English as my first and bloody only language? But yeah, I keep trying to stop beating myself up about things, but yeah. So, it did sound like even from an early time you had this awareness that you did want to, I guess, help people deal with what you were dealing with.
Yeah, that period of trialing and error. I played the guitar, tried to learn the guitar, I said, Spanish. I picked up multiple different sports. I was reading self-help books, all that type of stuff, right? Just to figure out what am I going to do next. Had no idea.
It is a little bit odd as to how in some ways our circumstances mirror each other a bit, because I moved from Sydney to Cairns, not exactly to be with my lady, she was already with me, but it was because, at the time I didn't know what I was doing in Sydney and everything just didn't seem to fit together, and she still had her house up there, and it seemed like a great place to escape. I mean, Cairns is a lovely spot, and they've done some good things with it in the couple of years before I left, but it really, I do tend to look at that. I mean, you got out and experimented and tried various things and sports and what have you, whereas, I think I was just lonely and didn't really, I wasn't even drinking and partying. I was the only kid. I was trying to be the good boy. It sounds like you had a pretty good family life. And I didn't, by a lot of lights, I didn't have a bad one. I had my mum and my dad. They were there. They were present. But the thing I remember most as I was a youngster and in my early 20s, the thing I was yearning for was, I came up on all the love songs and love stories and what have you, and I think I wanted that intimate connection with somebody. And that was kind of like my fixation, I suppose. And in some ways, I fixated on Vicky in that way. But yeah, Dad was he's intelligent, but he was and he still is in a lot of ways angry and opinionated. It's almost like he looks for excuses to be angry, and will immediately have a thought about something and a response about something. And when you're a youngster, it's your dad, so of course your dad's right. And then as you start to grow up, you sort of realize, oh, hang on a second, why is dad so angry about, well, I don't know if I quite realized that, but I noticed that dad was angry about everything because it started as I, stopped performing quite as well at school and would get the grade cards back saying, he's obviously an intelligent boy, but he's not living up to his potential. It was because I was just trying to keep my head down in life. And, report card time just became that time twice a year when I knew that dad was just going to get angry at me. So, yeah.
It sounds like, well, you're totally opposite to what you're explaining that your dad is. Is that because of seeing your dad and you thinking that's not me, or do you take after your mum? What do you think?
That is a good question. And thank you very much for asking these back at me. I mean, I don't want to make the chat fully about me, but I like that it's at least we're having a conversation, and it will give our listeners a chance to know our host. In the last few years, I actually got some interesting comments from a few people that they noticed that when I talked about my youth, I would always talk about my dad. And my mum is a hard person to kind of nail down. I got my love of science fiction from her. I remember being a reader of the Anne McCaffrey Dragon Riders of Pern series. I would share my Transformers comic books with her. And I think, I guess I felt at least that mum was the person I could try and keep, but I never, I never did really connect with her, I think, either. She kind of, I think looking back, and it took me a while to realize, I think in some way she kind of kept a bit of a distance, whether it was just her and dad being my parents. I just got the feeling like they were the team, and, it was weird, because I remember sort of back in year 8 at one point, we went out on holiday and dad tried in his own way to talk to me and, was kind of wondering what was going on with me. And he sort of said, I thought it would be, you and me against the world. And I didn't have the words or even the confidence to kind of say, Dad, it feels like you against me. I don't want to try and say that the issue was that I was an only kid. I'm sure it was a factor, but you know what it's like, I try to avoid looking at how life could have been different had I had siblings. But another thing about me is that I was the only person in my age in my family.
Yeah, okay.
Everybody, I mean, my mum and my dad each have a sister. My aunt on my mum's side was married, and her husband died a few years before I was born. Yeah. And she never dated, she never remarried, she never had any kids. My dad's sister stayed with dad and hers mum and dad, my grandma and granddad in the UK, and seemed, they had a big enough house where they could have separate enough lives. And she seemed, for want of a better word, content with her lot. And again, never seemed to date, never had any inclination to have kids. Mum and dad stopped at 1. I felt like, in looking back, it seemed like I was kind of the odd one out. I was this kid in a bunch of, and in some ways, opinionated parents who would get, when they get together, they would all be around the table, be talking about stuff that I didn't understand and politics, and I just felt isolated and alone. And
that would be, and I guess, we talked about loneliness, and I had that kind of sense growing up as well, feeling lonely to a certain extent. But for me, I was lucky enough, we're a big family. My dad and my mum both had lots and lots of brothers and sisters, and we had lots of first cousins, and a lot of my early friends starting off in life were my cousins, my first cousins, right? And so that's where you learn social interactions and engagements and build your skill set or social skill set that then takes you into school that you've already kind of prepared for.
And that's another point as well. I mean, there are a few factors there. We moved out from the UK to Australia in 1988, so we left all of my childhood friends and support network behind. I was in primary school in Sydney's immediate north, and then we found a house at the top end of the North Shore. So then after a few months at one school, I was then at another school for a year and a half. Then I got into high school, and I didn't get other kids. Being in year 7, being around all these rambunctious, rude kind of kids who'd, poke fun at my accent. And I didn't know how not to take it personally. You know what I mean? Yeah. So yeah, it didn't help me, feel any less alone. And I am glad of the mates that I did make, and that we, kind of had our group in high school. But yeah, it was just this sense of, I'm saying the word a lot, but loneliness, really. It's interesting to, compare it to you, that even with your family and your support network, you still kind of hit this thing where you had your quarter life crisis and you weren't sure what was next. I mean, I hate to go trauma Olympics or anything. It doesn't sound as though anything particularly too bad happened. Even though I guess you're partying, and any drinking that you were doing didn't seem to be to any great excess. You didn't get arrested, and you didn't wind up getting your stomach pumped or anything like that.
Luckily enough, yep.
Yeah.
I think that the only kind of trauma that I really had, which isn't really major, was parents divorcing. Parents went through separation at around the age of 10. And then, they separated for about 11 months, and then my mum came back, and, you needed to be separated for 12 months to make a divorce official. And so that period of time, I remember a lot of my childhood, but those particular year or two then, I can't recall much of it at all. It's kind of blocked out. And I think maybe that's a mechanism in my mind to kind of block out the challenge and the frustration and the sadness that I had at that time. I do remember crying a lot as at that age as a kid, not knowing, not understanding, why your parents want to separate at that age. But I had great parents and loving parents, and a couple of years later, I realized, it's probably not a good thing, but out here, divorce is pretty common, right? And so a lot of families, a lot of friends, it's like, I got, separated parents. It's like, yeah, me too. And that's where you kind of build that connection with other kids as well. But that's the only real trauma. But you're right. I grew up, in a loving environment, supportive family and friends. And I was very social because I played basketball and other sports. I made friends pretty quickly. It wasn't really a challenge for me. I'd make close friends and best friends real quickly. In hindsight, as I look back in those years when 30 was the life-changing moment where I knew kind of got out of that period and knew the direction. I had motivation and drive to get out of that. But I think it all stems back from loneliness, right? Like I've always been a person that wanted to be in relationships, wanted to have that feeling, had a few kind of hit and misses throughout my teens and 20s. And as you get closer to like middle to late 20s, when I was 16, I thought by the time I'm 20, 25, I'll have 2 or 3 kids. I'll have working towards a 7 or 8 kid family household. That in my mind, that's where my life was going. And getting into 25, 26 and not having that relationship and seeing, I guess, my clock ticking from the expectation that I had when I was young, that's where that kind of an uncertainty and uncertainty of my purpose came about. And so, that's where I was trying different things, experimenting different things, trying to find my purpose. But the purpose really was to become someone that I could find the love of my life. I think that's what it all came back down to.
That sounds like a lovely thing to realize that. And I don't know. I like the idea of it, and I've always been a bit of a romantic, and at some point I would definitely love to have somebody in my life again. I've dated a little bit since Vicky died, and I've met a couple of very genuinely nice people, one of whom was thankfully smart enough to break up with me because I was not ready. And after that, I started realizing that I was not ready despite the rush of emotion and attachment. So I would usually be the one doing the breaking up, which was, an experience. It's like, okay, now I'm actually, I'm dumping people. I'm initiating the conversation. I'm saying, this is too early. We're feeling way too much too soon. We're getting too giddy and making too big commitments. I'm realizing that right at the moment, what I need to do is take my time and just socialize more and meet people and spend time getting to know them, which is, taking a little bit of time, but we will see. You did mention 30 as kind of a key age. Was there a particular moment that you sort of blinked and everything kind of came together and you went, right, now, was there a trigger for it? Or, what do you remember about realizing what you were about?
Yeah, for I guess getting into like the later part of my 20s, 27, 28, that type of age, I started getting out of that kind of uncertainty about where my life was headed. And a big part of that at that time still wasn't in a solid relationship, but I got into boxing, which kind of changed the trajectory of my life, right? So it helped me get fit, be confident about myself. It was, I think it was about 20 odd kilos that I lost at that time. Then I found that I was good at something. Luckily enough, not a brag, but I'm pretty coordinated when it comes to sports. I can pick things up pretty quickly. I found that out as a kid, playing all different sports and winning in different sports. And so when I did boxing, it was a shot in the arm in the confidence, because not only did I lose weight, I liked who I was in the mirror. I looked good in the mirror, what everyone always kind of won't admit sometimes, but wants, and had so much strength. But also because I knew how to fight and defend myself, it gave me that extra bit of confidence to walk into a room with my head up high and not fearing any situation. And it wasn't about, knowing that I could fight and if I was 20 and had those skills, it'd be a different situation. I think my ego would get in front of me, but because I was getting to late 20s and 30s, it allowed me to be confident in who I was, walk into a room and know in any situation I can handle it. And talking to anyone and everyone, being in a group or a room full of people that I didn't know, I learned how to assess a room really quickly, because as a part of boxing and self-defense as well, I did self-defense. You scan a room and you look at the situation and the scenarios when you walk in to know where's your exits, who could be a threat, who's who in the zoo. And that gave me a skill set in terms of being confident and socializing and knowing myself. That, like I said, it kind of started the trajectory of getting out of that rut and having that sense of, okay, I'm proud of who I am, I love who I am, and also gives you confidence to talk to women as well. That's a part of it.
I wonder, I've had friends of mine who've talked about the similar benefits that doing some sort of martial sport give you. And they've talked about how, even if you don't intend to be violent, at least it just gives you that confidence that you can handle, or at least you've got better odds in should a violent conflict occur around you, or should someone else decide to start something. But I had to have a bit of a giggle, because guess what happened earlier on today, Xav?
What happened?
I was out, I decided today was going to be a fun day. I had no specific plans. I went out and saw Transformers 1 at the cinemas. And then I walked from one side of town to the other because I needed to go get a new printer cartridge. And I walked past a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu studio.
Nice.
I went back up the road from Officeworks, turned the corner because there was another store that I was going to go to. Well, there were a couple of them. There's a board gaming, tabletop miniatures gaming store right next to a supermarket where I wanted to get some bits and pieces. And I was just walking past the jiu-jitsu studio and I went, you know what? Why not? Let's just pop in and ask and, just say, hey, look, I'm interested. What do I need to know? I've never done a martial art before. And it looks like Tuesday night. I'm going to be doing an introductory.
Very good.
So yeah, I think, and I get the feeling, it's odd, right at the moment, I'm in this phase where, aside from this podcast, I don't want to take too much big stuff on because I feel like the rest of it, my main project is socializing and also reading books, which is kind of an antisocial thing, but still. But yeah, just more like general learning rather than, I've had a couple of people suggest doing some courses, and my mindset is like, you're not necessarily wrong, but it's not yet. There are other things I need to be doing I need to be doing first before I commit to, 6 months, a year, couple of years of a course of study. But yeah, it's fun that you were talking about boxing, and then I don't know, I worry a little bit that I'm being I'm being trendy. I'm following a trend because Brazilian jiu-jitsu, it's everywhere. Everybody's doing Brazilian jiu-jitsu nowadays. I just don't want to look like one of the sheep who's doing.
Well, you've picked a great sport. So for me, that's one of the things that I'd like to look at later down the line is doing that. I've had a lot of friends that do that, but for me, that's the number one sport. When Athena gets a little bit older, my little one, my 2.5, Terra, turning 3, when she gets to that age, that's what I want to get her in to start, because what you learn there is something that will be able to take a lot on in life. Protect herself, but I think Dana White talks about it, is that you can play basketball, you can play tennis, you can play all these other sports, right? And you can socialize, and that's great. But unless you're a 1%, you're not going to become pro. Unless you're a 7-foot person, you're not going to become pro in basketball. Like there's certain element of gifts that come along with it. Jiu-jitsu is a skill set that you can learn and take and have for life. And as Athena came into my life as an olderish man, I want to know that, one, I can keep fit enough so I can protect her even in the next 20 odd years, but also for her to be able to protect herself when, she gets a little bit older. So
yeah,
definitely something that I'm looking at.
One thing I am curious about, becoming a dad in your very early 40s.
Yes.
There is, of course, this perception that if someone becomes the father of a child, like later in life, some people, I've heard them talk about becoming a father like it's natural, or even that they have an ambition for it in some ways, where it's just never felt part of my makeup. It's never been something that I'd planned for or expected or really wanted. You already had 2 kids through a stepdad to Linda's 2. What was that like? And then the adding to that of your and Linda's child.
Yeah, well, like I said before, is that in my teens and 20s, my early 20s, I thought I'm going to have a big family. Like, I want a basketball team. Like, I want 5, 6, 7 kids. By the time I'm 30, 32, whatever it is, I'll have all these kids that I can look after. And that was kind of my dream, right? And as I mentioned, as I kept getting of age and, and still not having a solid relationship, I kept thinking, putting that kind of pressure on myself that I guess, you see the career women do on themselves as well, the biological clock ticking, and they get nervous, and it kind of leads into depression and all sorts of unfortunate things, which, I guess I had that similar feeling in my mid-20s when I never, when my goal was to do that, and I've hit of age and that wasn't happening or looking like happening anytime soon, and, it kind of spiraled. But met Linda at 30, and, she had Kale and Tarika, who were at the time about 9 or 10 and 7, and became a really solid part of their life, an influential part of their life, and it was exciting. It was exciting. I mean, I missed all that nappy, pooping, all that stuff, but to still have that influence and see them go through that period of teenage years and thinking they know everything and all that stuff. But it's great to have that influence in someone and being able to guide and mentor people, I think. And that was exciting. That was really exciting for me. The challenge that I had at that time is that it was a split household. So, you know, my father would have him week on and we would have him week on, and what we thought parenting was different to what he thought parenting was, which caused a lot of conflict and challenges, and you know, what we were trying to instill in these kids was different to what, you know, the father wanted to. So
yeah,
you have that influence, but it made it really difficult, right? Then, like, we knew mid-30s, I think, we knew, okay, we were up in Cairns and like, we're going to start a family, we're going to have our own little one. And so when I was up in Cairns, actually, she fell pregnant twice, and we lost it. One was through an ectopic where it was, one failed pregnancy, and then we had another failed pregnancy. I think it was like 7 or 8 weeks in. And we thought we were ready then at mid-30. We knew we were ready then. But yeah, it to go through that period, you kind of wonder, okay, was that my last chance? And so you kind of stress out, you worry, then you go through this grief period, you know, the stages of grief. You know, there wasn't a human, but there kind of was a human. And is this my last opportunity, my last chance for this dream that I always kind of wanted when I was 20? And it was, I guess, also that contributed with the, you know, the financial stress up there in Cairns, and also trying to figure that out. And by that part of my life, I was, you know, already part of my personal development, professional development. I was already deep into that. I was in a solid mindset, mind frame, but those things kind of knocked me back. And I think when we came back to Sydney, it was funny. We came back to Sydney just before my 40th birthday. I think I was, 39, and we're like, okay, things are going well here in Sydney. We've cleared out all our debt. We are traveling all right financially. We're pretty stable in terms of our household. What we're going to do is we'll get Linda's health in a good situation, and we'll try, in another year's time. So we had this goal in mind to try. Because we were so relaxed, it happened before we wanted to plan, right? Should I say happy 40th birthday to me? But yeah, it just came naturally, and no worries, no stress. And because we weren't trying, we were lucky at 40 as well. And she's the same age, right? And so there's always this kind of worry at the back of your mind. Do we know I need to go IVF? My friends are going through similar challenges.
Yeah.
But yeah, it worked out well. But then you have that period of, first when she told me, my initial shock was an understatement, because she's like, by the way, I think I'm pregnant. And I just looked at her blankly going, how? She's like, do I need to explain how this works?
Yes.
I'm like, how? What do you mean? How?
Xavier, when a man and a woman like each other very much.
This is how. So, but it goes to show when it least happens when you put less pressure on you, less external stress, like it just happened, and it was wonderful. And the first initial months or the first few weeks, it was, because we lost two, we were nervous as hell. Didn't say anything to family. And we waited for that kind of 12-week scan. And as soon as, even sitting there in the scan, because I have flashbacks of up in Cairns when one of them was, they were scanning, they could see the egg, but there was nothing there. And they had someone else come in and looked, and they couldn't find anything. And then that's when they explained what that situation was. And so that period with getting that scan and having a look and seeing, and I was like, because they're so little, it's only a dot. And I'm like, oh, my heart sank. I'm like, there's nothing there. And she was like, see that dot? That pulsing? That's a heartbeat. And it was just that sense of relief, and as soon as that happened, I told my dad, told my mum, and I said, we're only 12 weeks. Don't tell anyone else. I just needed to let you know. So it was them two and my best friend just told him. And then it was like, a few weeks after that we kind of told the news. But looking in hindsight, being a new dad at 40, when I thought 25 was when I wanted kids, I now know I wouldn't have been ready. And, I'm at 21, 22, you're still immature, your brain's still developing, and what I thought I knew everything back then, as a lot of people that age think they know everything back then. But through life experience and being more mature, it's for me, it was the perfect time. We're in this day and age where how many people do you know are having kids late 30s, 40s because career happens, life gets in the way, everyone wants to travel, everyone wants to do their stuff first before getting into that point. So I know a lot of people that are in that similar situation, and it's great because I have a lot of experience and knowledge and a lot more patience than I would have 10 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that brings us to the second of the questions that I like to ask, and it's the one that, in a way, in Babylon 5 started a galactic war. Xavier Esteban, what do you want?
$20 million? No.
Don't we all? I mean, yeah. I don't know, maybe 200 grand? No, 500 grand would sort me out quite nicely, I think. But it will be nice.
What do I want? I want to know that I have left a lasting legacy behind, that people will remember me after I've gone for at least a generation. The way life happens, you lose people, you mourn for the ones you love. It goes for weeks. Grief can happen at any time, year, 2 years on, 3 years on. You get this, you think you're over it, then you get this sudden sense of having this feeling that you're breaking down and crying for no reason. Well, a reason, but the reality is in a decade's time, you won't be remembered by too many people except your inner circle or the people that you love.
Yeah.
In 20, 30 years time, you might be remembered by the next generation. But after that, you're a blip in memory. We have digital footprints now, but you won't be a memory to anyone. I mean, like, I don't know anything about my great grandfather. So that kind of thing of, as time goes on, you're not going to be remembered. But what I want to do is at least leave enough of a legacy that I've inspired enough people out there that at least, not to be anything famous or anything like that, but just to know that I've influenced people in, after I'm gone, that might want to be better and do better in their life because I've done something that inspired them, or inspired my little one to then, for her to inspire other people. So I want to just be able to leave a lasting legacy in life. And it wasn't really Athena that Athena kind of solidified that. But when I lost my best friend a couple of years ago, suddenly, who was my age, he was a great man, Lee, and I loved him to bits. And he did so much in terms of my life to help better and improve my life. Not directly, just indirectly through knowing him, through being a part of his life. But then I thought, what can I do to keep his memory on for a little bit longer? Because he didn't have family, like he didn't have the opportunity to have kids and pass on that generation. So I want to be able to, use the person he was that influenced me and take that on and be able to do something similar to other people around me to share that what I've learned from him. And so, yeah, that's my wants in life.
No worries. I'm not sure if we've talked about Lee. I think this is the first time that you've mentioned his name to me. I could be wrong. If you don't mind me asking, what happened with him generally? I've been hearing a lot lately about how one of the biggest killers of men nowadays is themselves, and not killing each other, but taking themselves out of existence. Was that the story with Lee, or was it something else?
No, it was health. So it was sudden and a shock. He got Legionnaires, and yeah, and he's I mean, he wasn't the most healthiest person, but he wasn't in terrible shape. But yeah, it was just a shock where he was put into an induced coma after falling ill, and we thought that all he needed to do was recover, and we thought, okay, that's fine. A couple of weeks, he'll come out of it. And that was always the line of thinking of, okay, we just need him to shut down, to heal, and then bring him out. And so after a couple of weeks, when all of a sudden they realized that it was worse, and that it wasn't anything that he was gonna get out of anytime soon, that's when it started, coming down on us that, oh wow, okay, there's a relative risk here, but it was still not real to us, to myself. And then, within a span of a week, the decision was made to take him off the life support and let him go. And that was hard because, like, even I couldn't go visit. I couldn't, because it was so shocking to me and unreal to me. I couldn't go visit. His brother was there in the last few moments and wanted to know if I wanted to jump on a phone call and say my final word, and I couldn't even do that. It was way too hard for me to think and comprehend. And so, yeah, for me, I remember what happened, where I was, and I then, went down to the river and sat by the river. I had the cigar he gave me for my 40th birthday, and the whole goal was for us to find an opportunity to smoke it together, because we both fell in love with cigars, and we always talked about the different cigars, and he gave me a good quality cigar on my 40th, and we were going to find a spot, and it just never eventuated, unfortunately. And so I knew I had to sit there. They gave me the news that that his life had ended, and sat there just by myself, smoking this and trying to recall as many memories as possible. What I did that to help me was I grabbed my phone, and straight after I heard the news, I recorded myself, how I was feeling, what was I thinking, and recalling as many memories and stories of him and what we went through as I could. Because when it comes to memories, your memories is only as good as your last recall. Yeah. And, the next time you recall it, the memory slightly changes and other bits come in. And when you're recalling it, it's what you recalled the last time. And then the next time after that, it slightly changes again. So that's the reason why I wanted to record as many stories as I could to remember it as clear as I could at that time, because I knew if I didn't do that now, it'd start to fade and have different kind of twists and turns to these stories that I wanted as fresh as possible. And it was such a great thing for me to help process that moment, but also it for now when I'm recalling it, it's happy memories, and it helps me when I'm going through those periods of, oh my God, I'm crying all of a sudden for no reason because something came up, or I drove past a place that we went to 20 years ago. And, I allow myself to grieve and cry. I don't stop it. I accept it. It then becomes a positive feeling. Even though I'm in tears, it becomes a positive feeling because it means I still give a shit. I'm recalling my best friend and I still give a shit. And then I will play back those videos to kind of have a laugh and remember the good times. And as I tell my other mates who, we're all kind of mourning him, I say, look, we've had 20, 30 years with him and they've been great years. It's better that than not having that time. And so, let's appreciate and love and remember that instead of kind of letting it overwhelm us and eat us alive.
Indeed. Thank you very much for sharing that story of your friend and how you processed your grief of the loss of him from your life. It does lead to a topic that I consider kind of core to this podcast, because it's my belief that while nowadays in this modern society, you can do a lot on your own with minimal interaction or direct aid from another human being, but I believe that we can do things, not only more things, but the things we do them in a much better quality. The result and the doing of the thing are both much more rich when we do them with other people. So,
yep.
Who is in your life who is either helping you get what you want, or is just there, directly, or is just there for you, Xavier Esteban? And who are you there for in return?
I am lucky in the sense that I have a great inner circle. So I talk about this a lot, is that, and we hear a lot about this, is that you're only as strong as the 5 people or the people that you're close and surrounded to. And if you have people that bring you down and are negative, then that starts to take a toll on you. And so for me, I'm lucky that I have a lot of great people that are close to me that I can lean on during the difficult times, but also that I can inspire and support and guide through their difficult times. And these are people that I've known for 20 odd years, maybe longer in my life. So Lee was one of them, but there's also like 4 or 5 others in my circle that I've known for just as long, 20, 25 years, 30 years. And they're the people that through my teens and 20s and up to my 30s, you see every day, you hang out every day, you do things, you socialize. It's a great group, a great core that I have of best mates. And then family comes, everyone's doing their own thing. We might see each other 2 or 3 times a year. We have luckily we have our chat groups and we talk on chat. Some of my close friends despise social media. They're old school. So at least with WhatsApp groups and so forth, we communicate on a regular basis. And that's something that I'm very keen on, especially with Lee passing, that we stay that connected. But these are, I guess, lucky my boys, my mates that I might see a few times a year, some a little bit more frequent, but they're the ones that will drop a hat and come to me when I say I need you, and vice versa. There's been many situations in the past in recent times where I've just needed someone and they've either picked up the phone or physically drove from where they were to come see me straight away. And you can vent and talk to them, or you can sit there in silence, just knowing that their presence is enough. Yeah. So, and I'm not naive to know that a lot of people don't have that. My wife is a great example. My wife, who is a part of my inner circle as well as my parents, and they're probably my go-tos. But my wife, she hasn't had the luxury of having close friends because mum moved around a lot and was never settled in one place, and mum had a challenging upbringing, and mental illness played a big part of that, and depression. And so my wife had the most challenging upbringing, and so she didn't have much in the way of friends or family. And so she's made kind of a couple of good friends now, but she always tells me, she's like, our stories and the things we relate to is what's happened in more recent times, because we've only known each other in more recent times. You have these mates that you've been with for 20, 30 years that you talk a different language to when we're all together. You talk about stories and, and keywords that I have no idea what you're saying, but then you guys are just laughing over such trivial, stupid one-liners and that's, for her, she gets that loneliness by just observing and seeing that. And so I'm very lucky that I can do that, because as you get older, it is harder to, not impossible, but it does become harder to kind of make those deeper connections.
Yeah.
But for me, I always tell people that shouldn't stop you. You start now, you make those deeper connections, and then you'll have the next 20 years to build that same, that same stories and fun. And yeah, but it's really important to have, like you said, that close inner circle that you can rely on. But I've always been, earlier on, I was the peacekeeper. So the group was a bit of a wild group, and I was the one that had my wits about me, that was able to be the judge, the one that would stop, fights breaking out, or the peacekeeper within groups, or peacekeeper in social settings. And now I feel like also I'm that kind of therapist and mentor and and help with people who just want to vent and unload. But I love that. I love being able to influence friends to go see therapists, psychologists, and focus on their mental health, because that is really key and important.
Absolutely. And I'm glad I've had access to a therapist for the last few years, including some really tense periods in my life, funnily enough, in my recent life, even after Vicky died. So my next question might sound like kind of an odd one. Why are you here? Which I like to think of it, I don't want to impose my interpretation of what that question means on other people, but I kind of think of it about, here we are in this current moment in a specific set of circumstances, doing things in the now, or at least, in the immediate recent period of time. So, yeah, tell us about the situation you're in now and the things that you're doing and why you're doing them, how they fit into that broader, your broader sensation of what the legacy that you want to leave.
Why am I here now?
Even if it's just why you're here on this podcast.
Why am I here now? Well, back in the day, aliens came down and what they did with the Egyptians. Well, for me, I think we talked about, kind of leaving that legacy behind. And so for me, it's getting into the thick of what does that mean? What does that mean to actually do, the doing part of it, the actions part of it? I got made redundant at a job a few years, 2.5 years now. And so I had about 4 months of sitting around trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I'm trying to find a job over Christmas period. Worst time to be made redundant, mind you. But it was 4 or 5 months after Lee passed away. And I knew that I wanted to leave a legacy, but I didn't know how or what that meant. Getting that time to think was valuable. And so to me, it was like, how can I start to build that kind of sense of community? So, with no experience, still no experience, started a website, started a Facebook group, Instagram, all the social pipes. And it's like, okay, I want to build a community where I can do and share positive things, whether it's just positive messages, positive quotes, things that will make people think. I get a kick out of seeing on social media messages, images, quotes that uplift and pick up my day, and I wanted to do that. So it was about, through the thick of social media 8-9 years ago, when I knew through my personal development, trying to be better, what I needed to do was making sure that I'm being the gatekeeper of my mind and filtering all the negative shit that's out there. Social media is a bandit for that.
Yeah.
So one of the things I did 8 years ago was make everything that was positive favorites in my feed, then my friends, and making sure that the algorithm didn't pick up any negative news or anything like that. And if it did, remove it. So, as a habit, you go through your social media, whether you're on a train or on a toilet. No, you shouldn't be doing that on a toilet. And in the quiet periods of time, scrolling. And I knew that everything for the next couple of minutes was all positive stuff to reinforce the positive messages, the positive thoughts, the ideas, those things that would feed into my mind every day. Very rarely did I see any negative news or anything like that, because if you did, I'd shut it down and block it out. So I wanted to do something similar in terms of sharing that, just give people a thought of the day, give people some quotes, some short videos, that type of stuff. Build that community, and then get to a point where I can start sharing my own messages. And so that's where I'm at the moment now, is all the learnings that I have taken in terms of my personal and professional development over the last 10 years, 10 years, starting to then put things that I've learned together to share that to the world in the most basic forms, to get people thinking about how can I get started. Because I do, anywhere between 3 and 8 or 10 hours a week of personal and professional development. I study and learn a lot of things. My memory is not the best. My learning ability isn't the best. I have a bad habit now that I realize. I will watch and relearn things over and over again till it sticks, which now I know is not the best way to learn things, but it's all I've ever known how to learn things. Is read it till it sticks, the way that David Goggins talks about it. Now, I have focused on how do I learn better. So listening to people like Jim Quick and people that give you ideas of how to recall memory, how to learn. So then I can make those 3 hours or 8 hours that I'm doing personal development a little bit more effective. A lot of where I can take things on pretty quickly and make them actionable items. And so then I can recall that and then, and be able to apply it in my life as quickly as possible to take the learnings. And so I want to take that and share that with the world and give people some, a couple of things that they can do to get started. Because you listen to the Andrew Hubermans of the world, these people are so, I feel dumber listening to these people because they are so smart and switched on. And it can be overwhelming for the most common man like myself to want to get better, but how do I do that when for 4 hours they're talking about things that are going over my head? How can I simplify that? And that's what I want to do now as the next part of this. Is I've built that small community. Now I want people to give them ideas of what has worked for me, what hasn't, and kind of break it down to like maybe a couple of handful of points that they can take away. So that's what I'm doing. That's what I'm working on. That's what I'm trying to be better at. So then I can share that to the inner circle and the wider group, and hopefully inspire a couple of people along the way.
Now, you will have to forgive me. I wrote down in preparation for this chat the name of the entity that you've created for coaching and personal development, and I cannot find it in my notes. So can you tell us about this thing that you are putting together to help people get their lives on track?
Yeah, you and 90% of my friends can't recall whatever, and I think I made it a little bit too difficult. But it's called Inspire, Influence, and Action. So inspireinfluenceaction.com. On the socials, it's Inspire, Influence, Action. Nice yellow lion that I created myself, my own logo when I first started. And so the thought process around that was I wanted to be able to get people to inspire people around them, get people to influence others in a positive way, not so much like the influences you see on social media, but just influencing people to take action, to do things. It's the doing that's the main thing. This is where people get bogged down in all this personal development, and they recall probably 5-10% of what they've done, and they don't take any action, so it's nothing tangible. It then becomes shelf-help instead of self-help, right?
Yeah.
And so that's the line of thinking, is to inspire, to influence, and to take action.
I've got to admit, I'm a little bit disappointed in you, Xavier. How come you're showing up on this video podcast without your branded T-shirt or anything like that? I thought you would have...
I know.
Mate, God, what's going on?
I have the branded shirt, the branded singlet. I have friends who are asking about, where's my shirt? So I'm working on that at the moment.
Yes, it's all about the merch, mate. It's about the merch.
Yeah, exactly. Just to get the branding out there. I wore it yesterday, and to be able to brand myself at work. And unfortunately, the little one decided to spill something on it. And so I blame her. And so that's the reason why it's not in action at the moment. But I'll definitely, you'll see it all over my branding, and I'll share it next time for sure. And I'll get you a shirt too, Rob.
Thank you very much. Looking forward to it. So, where are you going, Xavier?
Where am I going? To continue on this journey with the personal and professional development. But for me personally, it's what, besides leaving the legacy behind for my little one and inspiring and influencing her to be great in this world, it's what can I do for myself that is that means the last decade of my life is going to be a great decade of my life, and not frail and old and stuck in a wheelchair or that type of thing. Having my wits about me, being switched on, and being able to, go for walks and enjoy my last decade of my life. Now, Peter Attia talks about last decade of your life, because you're really not too sure when that's going to happen. Hopefully it's 90, 100, even longer, right? But you want it to be quality. And so for me, right now, I'm focusing on my physical health. What can I do to be functionally stronger? So things that I do is strengthening the right muscles to be able to get up off the floor, to be able to carry shopping, that type of stuff. It's no longer what do I look pretty in the mirror. That's not what I look at in terms of physical health. It's about my lungs going to support me to go on hikes or long walks, or can I do these things with hopefully grandkids at 80, 90, to be physically strong, that type of stuff, or switched on mentally to, that type of stuff. That's the things that I look at.
I mean, who knows, by that stage you might even be looking at great grandkids, for God's sake.
Yeah, that's right. So, that's the things that I want to focus on. Memory scares me sometimes, is that sometimes I think I don't have good memory. I forget things, but again, like I've been focusing and listening to a lot of Jim Quick stuff, and it's not that you don't have good memory, it's that you don't practice it.
Yeah.
So learning exercises, recall, doing memory palace, those type of things that I'm focusing on to be able to recall, to learn, to be able to keep that knowledge in my head, but also strengthening it, which, there's dementia and Alzheimer's that are in our family, and I want to make sure that doesn't affect me in my later years. So make the brain stronger now and bulletproof yourself for the future.
Indeed. There is a question that I like to ask at around about this time as an extension of that where are you going question, which is, what do you want the closing days of your life to be like? And you've just answered it. So that is fantastic. And heck, really, most of the questions that I would be asking at the end of this show, you've already gone over, and admittedly I did slightly ask them, especially like, where can people go to find out about you? And we now know that we can go to Inspire, Influence, Action. And it's on the wrong page of the notes that I just wrote down, and I just remembered that. So there you go. So look out for Inspire, Influence, Action in all the places you like to hang out on the web, pretty much, from the sounds of things.
Yep, definitely. And I think one of the things that I learned from yourself, Rob, is you have a wonderful voice, as people know, a great voice, but you are also a great communicator. And I learned that from you, observing you when we were working together. and I thought I was pretty good in terms of communication, but you have a way of being calm, and it's not necessarily just the sound of your voice, but you just have a way and a presence about you of how you communicate to others, even through the challenging conversations we've had with customers that I can hear you, frustrated customers that I've heard you deal with. But I knew that that was something that I took away from you that I needed to learn and trying to better myself, especially that I wanted to get myself in front of the camera. So I thank you for inspiring me to do that many years ago.
Mate, you're most welcome. And it's one of those things where there's a phrase I've heard a lot lately: you can't read the label on your own jar from the inside. And you don't realize the skills and the abilities that you have and that you can use, that other people just like look at you and go, why aren't you ruling the world with what you do? And I like, but what do you mean? I'm not that good. And I think, that's one of the things that I, especially in this time in my life, I put this podcast together in a way because I want to change my circumstances. And I want to use a hackneyed phrase, share that journey, because I can't be the only one on it right now. And talk with people like yourself who are, not only can definitely with inspire, influence, action, who can help other people who are in this. And that's why I'm always making sure I ask people about those times when they found themselves going, oh crap, what do I do now? I'm in a pit, because, I sometimes feel like I'm in one a little bit, and I want to get the answers not just for myself, but for everyone else who is feeling this or who is experiencing this. And I hope through Inspire, Influence, Action, you do some great things, and I will quite likely be coming to you for some help at some point with that, as I start taking a little bit of action. And Xavier, it's been a pleasure getting back in touch with you.
Definitely.
Getting, now that we are back in closer geographical proximity than Sydney and Cairns.
And 1,000 kilometers plus away. Yeah.
Exactly. There is still a little bit of distance between yourself and myself, but it's definitely, it's a matter of a little bit of public transport, or, prevailing on you driving, being a lovely person and driving down to my neck of the woods. But yeah, I'm definitely keen to catch up a bit more often. But this has been a great chat for this episode of the show. And I reckon that my listeners will get an absolute ton out of it. And I also hope that they then start looking up Inspire, Influence, Action and coming to you to help, to work with them on their own. Digging them, climbing themselves out of their pits and making their lives what they want them to be.
It sounds like we have a very similar purpose in life, and I have no doubt that we'll be collaborating a bit more in the future as well.
Certainly hope so, mate. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Rob. Appreciate it.